So when John, back to the beginning, when John got this schooling at Carrier, he was taught by Willis Carrier, who was the founder of air conditioning. He's a Cornellian, by the way. We had to find a place to live in Syracuse. So it was very difficult finding any places during that wartime. But we looked in the ads for people that were advertising for help. So we got an apartment, and John was going to do the shoveling the coal and shoveling the sidewalks. And I was going to be collecting the rent and doing some vacuuming inside, so we got this apartment. And then something happened about that, I don't remember what. But I remember that we were back in Utica at Christmas time, and we were still hoping to find a more permanent apartment. And on Christmas Day, Father Loftus, a friend of ours, called us and said he had an apartment in this place called Shopford Courts. It was supposed to be a very exclusive place. However, our apartment was in the basement, which was definitely not exclusive. There were a lot of kind of riffraff down there. But anyways, we took that apartment, and we stayed in there. Of course, I was pregnant with Jay, and we had this doctor in Syracuse. His name was Hatch. Perfect name for a obstetrician. So when Jay was born, we didn't go back to the apartment. We went right to Utica. Dad was working for Han then. Right now. So to find a place in Utica, we found this place on South Street. It's about 2 blocks from Geneseo. It was really a poor apartment. John carried me over the threshold. Had a junky old ice box, had to buy ice to put in it. I washed the diapers in the tub. It was quite poor. But then, somehow or other, we bought a house on Larchmont Ave in Utica. That was a real home. It was a nice house. We had a pretty good sized backyard. It was very nice. So we lived there quite a while. And then my father told us about he'd been trying to sell this house on Arlington Terrace in New Hartford. He had built 3 homes there, and they had this very unusual heating. The heat came from the ceiling. Anyways, he's having a hard time selling them, and they had no cellar in them. So he sold us one at a very reduced price, so we moved there, which was a very nice location.
Do you remember what you paid for it?
No, I don't, but it wasn't very much. So then we were in Our Lady of Lourdes Parish. And John had a lot of friends that he had grown up with, and of course by now they're married, so we started kind of palling around with them. We called it the Bush and Blanket Club. We had a lot of picnics and everything with them. Then one day we sat down, we talked about these friends. Of course, I had some friends from high school or whatever. And we decided that some of the friends I had, he didn't care for their husbands, and some of the friends he had, I didn't care for their wives. So we decided we'd find, this was Dad's idea, 12 couples where we both liked each partner in the couple. They're going to be Catholic couples. We're going to have a book club. So we came up with 12 Catholic couples that we wanted to cultivate. We started this book club. Dad called each one of them up, and they all accepted. Each one was to, no, there was 6 couples, excuse me, they made 12 people. Each one was going to give a book report on a Catholic book once a month. Take turns giving up. So there was Bill and Kitty Kernan, Jack and Mary Carl, Joan and, Joan Carl, I can't remember what her husband's name was. Tom and Etta St. John.
Bankerts?
I don't know if Bankerts were in that or not. I think they were, but I'm not positive. So anyways, that went along very nicely, and everybody enjoyed that. Called it the Bookworms. Kitty Kernan always called it that. So,
So how did Dad have time to read a book?
made time, I guess. Whatever. So then, let me see, then when we got pregnant with Martin, we were really crowded in that little house. That house was really tiny. I think there were 3 bedrooms in there.
Larchmont Ave? Or,
Arlington Terrace.
mhm.
Kitty Kernan always said it was the tiniest. She's always telling her friends that lived in these mansions, she was always telling them that I lived in the tiniest house she'd ever seen, you know, which was really impressive to all, you know. So then we looked for another place, and we found Root Street, which worked out very nicely, I thought. When Martin was born, we were living in Root Street.
Did you find the house or did Dad?
I don't know, both of us together. It had been owned by a couple we knew down in Betty Metzger. But that was a nice house, and it had 3 lots actually. The lot was in, and then there was a lot next door, and then there was a lot in the backyard. So that was great. So then the children were into New Hartford School, and we had room in the backyard for a garden. So I had a farmer plow it, and then I told each of the kids they could plant whatever kind of seed they wanted, and I'd buy it from them at whatever Shinatri was selling for that week. So I remember one year when I froze 1/2 ton of green beans that Jay was planting, the green beans. Larry wanted to plant potatoes because he didn't think there was much work with those. And each one picked a different thing. Do you remember what you planted? What was that?
It's different stuff different year. Usually lettuce,
Lettuce?
peas, cucumbers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you had to have the barn removed first.
Yes, we had the barn. There was a barn there. That was,
Horse barn.
yes, the Metzgers had horses. So the land was well manured, which was good fertilizer. That's why they had the extra lot in the back, because it was off of the property. In the winter, we had a little bit of a skating rink in the back, built to sort of a cement block thing, place for ice skating. Do you remember that? Wasn't very big, it was pretty tiny, right?
You had to put down some plastic first, I think. Seems like we laid down some plastic, with some corrugated metal around it. But
And you each had a lot of animals. What are some of the animals you remember having?
this interview is supposed to be for you.
Help me remember the animals, because I can't remember them all.
Dogs, cats, ducks.
Gerbils.
Never remember a gerbil, but I don't even know what a gerbil is.
Okay.
Gerbil? Anyway,
Well, then what was the year that the house burned down there? 79, I think. Does that sound right?
that was like 72.
72? got that written down on my computer, I could look it up.
Well, I was at college, so it was in the seventies, early seventies.
Oh, you were in college then? Okay. So the house burnt down. There were a couple of amazing things about that. I hadn't had the money to pay for the insurance, so I was delinquent on that, so they shouldn't have given us anything. But they did give us, pay off the, they did pay off the policy. And we got a much better house on Gilbert Road. 2 or 3 times I tried to figure out our finances, and somehow or other, we were way ahead after the house burned down. It didn't make any sense. With a better house or something. I don't know, just something the Lord did for us.
Sure was a little more than that. Maybe the interest rate you were paying was a lot lower.
I don't remember that. I remember Gloria D. showing us houses, and the only one that I even thought about was that one on Gilbert Road, but when she showed it to us, it had doors hanging off the hooks in the kitchen, and quite a few places looked run down. I said, Gloria, I just cannot move into a house like this. It's gotta be in good condition. So she went through and had the whole thing painted and jacked up and everything fixed. It's in perfect order when we went in there, which was terrific. I remember talking to Dad on the phone, saying, you know, I just don't like any of these houses. He says, just take anything temporarily. I always told you I'd build you a house in Puerto Rico, and I'll still do that someday. That would come up every once in a while, but that was as far as it got with the talking stage. We never got a house in Puerto Rico. I loved Puerto Rico when we went there.
Vicky liked Puerto Rico too.
Hmm?
I don't think she'd want to live there though.
It's pretty appealing. I loved all that sand beach.
Sand beach and the weather's nice.
Yeah, right, that's what was very appealing. So, Dad and I started doing some traveling. We were members of the family, trying to think of the whole name of it, Christian Family Movement. We are members of the Christian Family Movement, and let's see who was in that. I think that the McCanns were in that, and Van Slikes. I can't think who else. But anyways,
Bankarts?
I don't think Bankers were in that. So, they had something, once a year they had some type of a meeting in Notre Dame, Indiana. And they said, different ones in the group says, I think the Drozes should go. I said, we can't afford to go, we can't do that. Anyways, Hank McCann says, I'm gonna sell donuts out of the back of my truck after church on Sunday and raise the money so you can go, and he did. So we went. And what that particular conference was about having diversity in your neighborhoods, about doing special things for the black people. So this was the message we brought back. Oh, I know who else was in it, Dwyer. And I can still remember Art Dwyer saying, I've never met a decent black person. But anyways, we all prayed about it. We asked this black minister in town if he would get together. I think there were 6 of us, 6 couples, and match them up with our couples, and we'd make friends with them. So I don't know if you ever remember Phil and Lily Cooper. They used to come to our house.
Black couple?
Black couple. You don't remember them at all?
What year was this in?
I don't remember what year it was in. Their kids, I think their kids were going to Notre Dame. They had 3 children, they all became doctors. He worked at GE. In fact, there's a building in Utica named after her, almost across from the Stanley Theater. It's a Lily Cooper building. Somebody built it, I forgot their names now, Buck. And they named the building after her. So anyways, we became very good friends with them. In the meantime, we've grown to several dance groups. Dad and I really loved to dance. About once a month, we'd go to a formal dance. He would wear his tuxedo and I'd wear a long dress. I made quite a few of my dresses. Because we really didn't have any money at all. In fact, I can recall for 35 years, I didn't buy a single new thing for myself, not even a pair of socks. Because any money we had, we put in Dad's clothes and his socks and locked the room so certain people wouldn't be wearing his socks. So he'd always have good clothes for work. We got by with very few clothes for the other children. Nobody had any good clothes, except your father. So, but then, see, that was dances. We took this black couple to a dance.
The Debonaires?
Debonair's dance. We were invited to 3 cocktail parties that night. I called up each of the people and told them we were bringing a black couple and would it be okay. They all said, be fine. So they were the only black couple that ever came to one of the dances there. Dad danced with Lillian. She was quite attractive. Her husband didn't know whether or not to ask me to dance, but I pretty much goaded him on and we danced together. And we enjoyed them as a couple. Trying to think of what else. Well then, at some point, we started to, so this Christian Family Movement had overseas trips. All you had to pay for was your transportation. So we'd stay in people's houses that were members of the Christian Family Movement. They didn't charge us anything. And they were wonderfully well planned. They'd take us to the city council and all types of interesting things that ordinarily travelers, tourists don't get to. Well, those were wonderful trips. So after that, then we found out about this other group called Elder Hostel. And they were educational trips, and they too were, those were very low priced. And so we went on several of those. Eventually, we traveled to over 70 countries, mostly spending about a month each time in a country so you really get the flavor of it. I remember one time there were 17 flights in the trip. Your father said, oh, okay, 1 down, 16 to go, 2 down, 15 to go. He never liked the thought about traveling, but once he got there, he always enjoyed it. So we had some wonderful times traveling.